What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badgers. We got a first-time guest today, somebody who really has the pulse of the national recruiting scene on the football side. I am so stoked for this. Let's kick it off on Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, we try to give you something different every day with the Badger content, football and basketball. We have a great new guest today. Brian Smith is going to be joining as a regular guest on the Locked On Network as a recruiting insider. Somebody who's been doing it for a long, long time, has a great pulse on the national scene, but also down in the South at all the camps. Brian, thank you so much for jumping on.
Hey, man, I love it. Glad to be here. And anytime there's recruiting chatter, I'm more than happy to help.
Let's do it. I want to start here. We haven't really had a chance to break this film down yet. We talked about it when it popped, but Khamir Prescott, the newest Badger recruit, 6'1", 190-pound safety, high 3-star out of Philadelphia. What did you take away from his film when you popped it on?
Two things. Number one, he's got natural size, which means safety or, depending on the scheme you run, he could be a cover 3 corner. He could be a nickel slot, a lot of versatility. And then the other thing is something that the old school traditional coaches will love. He will thump you. There are a few kids, and I was like, ooh, somebody's mother is not happy. So it's just one of those guys where he enjoys the physical side. Like there's highlights of him playing receiver. No. Defense. That's just where he belongs. And he fits Luke Fickell to a T. That's the kind of guy they had at Cincinnati that could play versatility in terms of being in the box. Then he moves back, then he moves out, then he blitzes. They were so good at keeping teams confused. And he played different roles last year for his high school team, which also shows his football IQ to go with his God-given ability. Man, those are the kinds of kids. I'll watch that film any day of the week. And if he wasn't at the school he was at, like if he lived down here in Central Florida where I do, his ranking would probably be a little bit higher.
Well, and I wanted to ask you that. So I always love this question from people we're Badger fans. Like I'm a Badger fan. I'm very hyper-focused on Badger commits, prospects, targets, visits. You have a national perspective on it. So I always love to ask people with a national perspective, what is he missing from being a 4-star player? He's a high 3-star, pretty good offer list. We didn't mention that, but Penn State, Texas A&M, Michigan State, Nebraska. So what are we missing here just to get into that next tier?
More than anything else, I think it's just that he's a Philadelphia area kid. That's a basketball city. It's gotten a hell of a lot better with football in the last 5 years. When I was growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, Philly wasn't a city that got recruited a lot, especially like city kids. Now it's changed quite a bit, but there's still kind of a stigma. That same player, like I lived in Tampa the last 6 years, is probably a 4-star prospect because so you have to recruit Tampa. You have to. Every school's got somebody. So there's more scouts, there's more coaches, etc. It's going to be natural to get more buzz, and there's about a gazillion 7-on-7 teams. He's perfect for 7-on-7. You can play him a linebacker, you can play him at safety, whatever. He's not going to be seen as much. So is it the kid's fault? No. Is there anything you can do about to change it? No. It's a very natural bias because you can drop off in Orlando or Tampa, just recruit South Florida, you can get 80% of your class. And everybody looks at it that way. So it's just unfortunate. But I think he's a 4-star talent, just for the record.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned in your first comment about Khamir, a Luke Fickell type of a player. Yeah. Is there certain coaches, and I would maybe say like when Iowa goes after an offensive lineman or a tight end,
sure.
Ohio State a receiver, Luke Fickell in that defense trestle going after defensive backs with versatility. Are there certain places you say they have just a good eye for that type of talent?
Fickell, I don't think I would, first off, because he's such a good defensive coach, and he was one hell of a player for people that don't know when he was at Ohio State. Like he was a legit player. It wasn't like the guy at the end of the bench. He understands it, but he also understands, again, versatility. When I was watching his film, I couldn't just say, okay, well, he's definitely going to be, but that's what Fickell wants. He wants a kid that he can move around because they run a variation of a 3-3 stack. And sometimes they'll be in a 4-man look, etc. You need high IQ kids that aren't afraid to come off the edge or drop in and play center field. This is what he can do. So Fickell looks for kids that can fit his scheme. And some of the guys that they got while he was at Cincinnati weren't always, shall we say, high 4-star recruits. Some of them were 2 and 3-star recruits, but they fit his scheme. It's real. Your point about Ferenc and some of these other guys, they all find a fit. If you're not getting the kid that's going to Alabama or Georgia, you damn better well get an athlete and somebody that fits what you do so you can develop them. And Fickell is as good as any coach in America, especially on defense.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I want to finish up here with Khamir. I think he feels like this type of guy with his physicality and the skill set he already has, a high floor player. Now, those terms get thrown around a lot. High floor, high ceiling. I think sometimes they're overblown a little bit, but this does feel like a player that I feel pretty good projecting him to play at the college level. The frame's already there. The film is pretty good. Where do you fall on the high floor, high ceiling, and in terms of specifically Khamir?
I would say he's a guy that could end up getting drafted. I think that's the easiest way to look at his ceiling. Do I think he's a first-round pick? No, because I don't know which spot he is, but the physicality and the frame are there to be a big-time safety that can play in the second hardest spot in football. Quarterback's number one, obviously, and that's that slot position on defense, because you can have a 255-pound tight end in front of you or a 155-pound slot. And when they come out in 22 personnel, both those guys are there. You don't know where they're going to line up. Offense has always had the advantage, and that's why Fickell wants those versatile players. You have to be able to understand checks. Hey, so-and-so's at an unusual spot. Let's move our specialty player over here. I think his ceiling is super high in that regard. You've got to have players that can play in space now, even if he's somebody that blitzes a lot, because teams try to get one-on-one matchups. You need physical and smart defensive players. I love this kid's ability. He's a guy that's going to play early for the Badgers, and I wouldn't be surprised. If they kick off the first play he's on the field, he'll be on the kickoff team. All those kinds of special teams, all that, immediately he'll impact the Badgers.
Oh, Badger fans are excited to hear that. All right, we're going to take a very quick break for our friends of the show, but we're going to go back. We're going to talk about what is always considered the centerpiece of a recruiting class, the quarterback. We're going to break down Mettauer a little bit with Brian and see what he thinks of the 2024 quarterbacks game. But first, quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel, over at Built Bar. Again, I've talked about Built Bar so many times. It is just my nutritional go-to. If you want something that you can throw in the backpack, go on your way to the gym, in the back pocket, 100% real chocolate, incredible flavors. I don't know how they do it. We haven't been able to, it's 2023. We haven't been able to make healthy ice cream, healthy candy, healthy Doritos, but we can make healthy protein bars. And we finally cracked the code to make good tasting healthy protein bars, and Built Bar is the company that's cracked that code. My favorite flavor is churro. They're absolutely incredible. Tons of protein, not a lot of sugar, not a lot of calories. And now they've gone mainstream. Head to Walmart, get your 4-bar box, your variety box, or go to the Sam's Club, get your 13-bar variety box. 13-bar variety box is incredible, has tons of flavors in it. You're not going to regret it. You will thank me later. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the planet. I also want to take a second to thank all the everydayers, everybody that's grinding here, watching Badgers content every single day with us as we build this community. If you're on the podcast, you're amazing. If you're watching on YouTube, you're incredible. Thank you so much, and let's keep it going. All right, let's get Brian back on the show. And Brian, I definitely want to give people the opportunity. Where can they follow what you're doing so we can all get a little smarter with recruiting?
Twitter is where I'm at the most. I run the All Hurricanes site on Fan Nation, cover Miami, but to be honest, Florida and Georgia in general, I'm everywhere all the time. I'm kind of ubiquitous when it comes to right now is my favorite month of the year because all the high school practices in Florida, they get 20 of them. We like football down here in the Sunshine State. So I'm going back down to South Florida tomorrow. I'm going to be at IMG next week. Everybody recruits IMG, whether they want to admit it or not. So you can check me out at FBScout_Florida. There's somebody that's going to be coming out of where I live that's going to your school, no matter who you follow or who you cover, because everybody covers down here or recruits down here in Florida, Georgia. They have to. Most talent in the country.
You got to do it. You got to make that trek. Speaking of recruiting out of state, not in your area, but heading down to Texas for Wisconsin, the quarterback in 2024, the verbal commit, Mabrey Mettauer. I wanted to get your take on Mettauer, 6'5", good athletic ability, good arm, high 3-star player. His ranking actually went down a little bit if you look at the composite. I know Badger fans had a little consternation there. What are your thoughts? We're all always hyper-focused on our kids' recruiting rankings, right? That's just how fandom works.
It's true.
What are your thoughts on Mettauer? I know you've met him in person. You've seen the film. Where are you at on his game?
He is one of the most difficult players of the last several years to give a quote unquote final grade on. And here's why. Number one, it's quarterback, which is above the shoulders. If you follow the game, you know the deal. Some of the best quarterbacks ever weren't the most gifted. When I met him and he was a freshman, somebody said, that's him over there. And I looked at him, and I won't repeat what I said to them when they told me that, because I thought they were just lying to my face. He looked like he was 20 years old when he was 14 or 15. He was humongous. And he's gotten stronger, and he looks like a 25-year-old now. Like, he is just completely filled out, and his arm strength is asinine. It's just insane. He has an NFL arm right now, flat out. Now it's all the stuff about reading defenses, all the stuff I don't really get to see in the back room. But he can move a hell of a lot better than people think. His ability to escape the pocket, he'll run over somebody. He jumped over somebody in his junior year, and he's playing in Houston. For those of you that don't know where the Woodlands is, it's north suburbs of Houston, elite competition. So that's not in question. He's playing against dudes every year. And in the 7-on-7 circuit, he plays with a big-time program as well. He's as seasoned as it gets. The only question now, can he learn the little nuances? When to take something off a pass? He actually throws it too hard sometimes. Because if he does that, he could be the first pick in the draft. The arm strength, again, is just absolutely insane. And it's quite honestly been that way for a couple of years. He was physically ready when he was a sophomore in terms of arm strength and size.
So, and that brings up a question that I've heard a couple times from people reaching out to me, trying to get a little more clarity on it if possible. We've talked about the arm strength, and you just reinforced that, and even beyond what we've said. He's got the size, right? He's a 6'5", 6'4" kid with frame and build. He can move pretty well. High-level competition in an area with a lot of visibility.
Sure.
Why is he a 3-star? Again, I don't mean to hyper-focus on that, but it feels like there's something that is missing there that isn't just the fine-tuning of the throwing, because that's really hard, in my opinion, to evaluate at times.
I think people are just curious to see if he can develop the things I was talking about. They want to see the little things with the underneath throws and all that. Sometimes, at 7-on-7 tournaments, for people that don't know, I'll be 5 feet behind him, literally. So I see what he sees and all that. Sometimes I worry about if the kid's going to get killed or not because he throws it that hard on a 10-yard over route or whatever. He needs to take something off. And sometimes people just worry that he's just a thrower and not a passer. That's a term you'll hear back offices of a college football program, etc. And he's learning. Being a quarterback, to put it in perspective, is something that you never stop growing. Even Tom Brady, who's arguably the greatest player ever, I guarantee you he learned something during his last season with the Buccaneers. It is freaking hard to play quarterback. This kid's 17. So again, if I had to rank him, if 5 is the highest, that would be the ceiling for him. Right now I have him 3.5 to 4. I haven't seen him in the last couple months, but he could quickly go. If he just figures out the underneath stuff, he's immediately a 4 to 4.5 star player, because you don't have to worry about the mid game and down the field. That we're good. So he just has to understand the conceptual stuff of when to take things and just, take the 5-yard pass, don't force the ball down the field, and just give his guy a catchable ball, and he's good.
One of the things I think is really interesting for people who watch players in person, and this is where I'm really curious to get your perspective. We can watch film, but we don't see body language. We don't see how he interacts with people around him. Because I know you've met him, I know you've seen him in person. What is he like in person, from the charisma, body language, interactions with teammates, from a coaching standpoint? How does he take coaching? He's
a very competitive kid. He'll get on somebody if they drop a ball or something like that, but he's not some jerk either. He's kind of middle of the road with that. And he's a guy that if he throws the perfect ball isn't going to be an idiot either. A lot of 7-on-7 coaches kind of let their guys go overboard. He's not that way. And I also think Mettauer is one of those kids that will be someone you want to play with, because he's a fun guy. He's off the record and just kind of joking around with him on the sidelines. He's cool as heck. That makes it a lot easier to play with him, and he'll fit in at Wisconsin. That's not a fan base that's crazy in the sense of just going nuts like some of the other fans are, how they act and stuff. I respect Wisconsin fans a lot more than I do some other fan bases, but they are really into Badgers football. He'll be beloved in that regard. They won't have any problem. He'll sign autographs. He's a guy that'll be good with his teammates, coaches. He won't have any problems.
That's great to hear. And I wanted to also ask you, just again, zooming out from a national perspective, how big of a get is Mettauer for the Badgers? Luke Fickell's first full recruiting cycle, going out of state to a powerhouse, getting that quarterback. How big is that for the Badgers?
The Woodlands is one of those programs that if you recruit Houston, whatever school you are, if you go through Houston, the chances are extremely high you're going to have your coach go to the Woodlands. So that's check mark number one. Houston, a couple of years ago, to put it in perspective, was the number 2 city in America for producing players that like made it to the Super Bowl. It matters. So that's good news. Second, Texas is just loaded with a position that the Badgers have struggled with, is receiver, and he's a quarterback. I mean, think about Texas. Just it's unbelievable the number of quarterbacks and receivers that come out of that state. So when they got him, it caught my attention. I don't pay much attention to Wisconsin's recruiting, but when Luke got him, I'm like, okay, things are different. Now, obviously, the coordinator they just pulled from North Carolina, I get it. That offense, if you're a quarterback and you're not attracted to it, I'm a little concerned. So I'm not necessarily shocked. But when was the last time the Badgers got a kid from South Texas? You know, that was on that level. I don't remember it. So I think it's going to have a pull in terms of people. If I noticed it, so did other recruits. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee like, again, his personality, Mettauer, he's not the kind of kid that's going to turn people off. He's easy to get along with. It should help them get more guys on the outside at the very least. And they've always got running backs too. So that's also a help.
Yeah, and you talked about it. I want to finish up here with Mettauer, the Phil Longo connection, the offensive coordinator that has a track record of pumping out quarterbacks. To me, it felt like Luke Fickell came on board. Luke Fickell got Longo, and Longo got the quarterbacks. How big is it to get that type of a developer for quarterbacks for future recruits?
It's everything. I mean, if you don't have quarterback development, you're not winning in today's college football. Think about it this way. If I remember right, the 2 semifinal games in the playoffs this year, the losers had 45 and 41. The losers. If you can't throw the ball, it's over. I know that's not what Wisconsin's about. That's one of the reasons they don't get over the hump. They haven't had the quarterbacks. That's why they went after Longo. I mean, he can freaking coach quarterbacks. So now that they have him, it's not like Wisconsin's going to stop getting linemen. The Midwest has always had those kids. This could be really interesting. And the Big Ten West needs somebody, please, somebody to take the bull by the horns. I think it's going to be Wisconsin. And it's not because Fickell. It's going to be because of Longo. Everybody knows Wisconsin's got to play defense anyway. That was not their problem. They couldn't freaking score. Now they're going to have that chance. Longo, you could make an argument that regardless of team or conference was the most important coordinator hire in all of college football, because he took a team that never got big points in games unless they just went up against a team that couldn't stop the run, and to now he can run the ball. He did a good job of that at Carolina, but now he's got to, this is a guy that produces NFL quarterbacks. That changes the whole perception of the program.
Yeah, you have no idea how excited Badgers fans are.
It should be.
It is palpable. I want to pause there, take a very quick break for our friends of the show, and come back with one recruit, and I'm really interested in this one, that Brian really liked from last year's class that he thinks may be a little overlooked. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. I want to just say thank you so much for everybody tuning in, everybody listening. Brian has been an incredible guest. Thank you so much for helping us continue to build this community. All right, let's bring Brian back on. Brian, we talked about this a little off air, but I really would love your perspective, again, from a national standpoint. Who did the Badgers grab in last year's recruiting cycle that you think is a little overlooked or maybe wasn't ranked appropriately that you really like?
That's an easy one for me because, again, I covered Miami and they recruited this kid, Jamel Howard, out of Marist in Chicago. It is always difficult to gain defensive linemen that play on the interior. Either you're big enough to play there or you're not. He's 320 plus, but even though he's probably a guy that's got to redistribute some weight, his feet are very light. He could play in a 1-gap or a 2-gap scheme, and Fickell likes to run a multiple, 3-man front sometimes, and sometimes it's more of a 4-man look. He'll be fine in either way. He could 2-gap if you wanted him to, or he can 1-gap. He can be a penetrator. He's got really quick hands. Michigan, Miami, several schools went after him, and the Badgers got him. I think he's a guy that he might play a little bit this year, but his second year after he gets his conditioning up, he's got a chance to start. And again, Fickell likes to change their defense and do different things. You might even see Howard, depending on the team they're playing, play some strong side end in short yardage, etc. He's that kind of versatile player. Listed at 6'3", 320. I'm guessing he's closer to 330, 340 when he signed. Big kid. But again, Marist High School, Jamel Howard, I really think he's underrated.
And you and I know this. You know this really well, following recruiting for a long time. Not all offers are the same. Not all offers are legitimate. But the interest in Howard late, and I'd heard this previously, like that was legitimate. Miami, Michigan, like
Oh yeah,
they
yeah,
were really after him.
Miami really wanted him. Look, this just in. Miami doesn't have a shortage of talent on D-line usually. And they've got guys, they were somewhere like number 15 in the nation in sacks last year. They really wanted him. And they got a bunch of guys coming back on the D-line. What does that tell you? Michigan, their defense is ridiculously good. They wanted him. Sometimes it's just that obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Harbaugh, you may not like the guy, but he can coach some freaking defense. Michigan went after him. Miami went after him. He had offers from several of the Big Ten schools, etc. Howard's just a guy that kind of got overlooked early. Maybe it's because he was at Marist. They don't produce a ton of players, but I was surprised because it is still Chicago. It's not like it's an unusual place to recruit. In Wisconsin, man, they found themselves a player that I think is going to start for multiple years.
No, that is absolutely fantastic to hear. He is Brian Smith. Again, hopefully a recurring guest on this segment. We really appreciate it, Brian. Thank you so much. Make sure you go out and follow him, get a little smarter with recruiting. And for everyone else, we'll talk to you again tomorrow. We got Dylan Graff coming on. We're going to talk some basketball on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.